I believe you have something that belongs to me. The knock came just as Olivia Carter pulled a tray of cinnamon rolls from the oven. Warm air rolled through the cottage carrying the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh bread, wrapping around her like a favorite blanket. Outside, the sun hung low over the mountains, turning the pine forest beyond her windows into a sea of gold. Olivia frowned. Nobody visited her little cottage without warning. Another knock followed. Calm, patient, certain. For reasons she couldn't explain, her pulse skipped once. She brushed flour from her hands and crossed the kitchen. The moment she opened the door, she knew this wasn't an ordinary visitor. The man standing on her porch looked like he belonged in a photograph from another century. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark coat, silver eyes that seemed almost impossible in the fading light. Behind him stood several men dressed in black, all of them alert, all of them strangely tense. The silver-eyed stranger was the only one who appeared completely at ease. His gaze met hers, then drifted over her shoulder into the cottage. A faint smile touched his lips. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Olivia folded her arms. I think you've got the wrong house. No, he said quietly. I'm quite certain I don't. Before she could answer, a loud crash came from the living room. Olivia immediately closed her eyes. Please tell me that wasn't the lamp. Another thump followed. Then a low, irritated huff. She sighed. Actually, never mind. I already know who did it. A second later, a massive gray wolf appeared from around the corner with an overturned laundry basket stuck around his shoulders and one white sock hanging from an ear. The wolf froze. The stranger froze. The men behind him froze. For one glorious second, nobody moved. Then Olivia pinched the bridge of her nose. This, she said, pointing at the wolf, is what happens when you let a stray stay for 3 days. The wolf slowly sat down. The sock remained attached to his ear. One of the men behind the stranger looked dangerously close to laughing. The wolf's amber eyes immediately snapped toward him. The laughter died. Olivia stared. Honestly, you're in no position to judge anybody right now. The wolf looked offended. Deeply offended. Don't look at me like that, Olivia continued. You stole my favorite chair. No reaction. You ate an entire pound of bacon. Nothing. And yesterday you scared away a perfectly nice guy who was trying to ask me out. The wolf lifted his head proudly. Olivia pointed at him. Exactly. That's not helping your case. To her surprise, the silver-eyed stranger smiled. It wasn't a large smile, just enough to soften the sharp lines of his face. For a brief moment, he looked less intimidating and strangely familiar. Olivia couldn't explain why. The wolf immediately moved closer until his shoulder pressed firmly against her leg. Possessive, protective, like he had suddenly remembered she existed and needed guarding. Olivia automatically rested her hand on his head. The thick silver-gray fur was warm beneath her fingers. The wolf's eyes closed for the briefest moment. A single heartbeat. Then he caught himself and opened them again as if nothing had happened. Olivia fought a smile. She had noticed. The stranger had noticed too. Something unreadable flickered across his silver eyes. The evening breeze drifted across the porch carrying the scent of pine trees and distant rain. For a strange moment, Olivia realized the man smelled faintly of the same cold mountain air that always seemed to cling to the wolf. The thought made no sense. She pushed it aside. 3 days? The stranger asked. 3 very long days, Olivia replied. I found him near Miller Creek during the storm. His attention sharpened immediately. During the storm? He was standing in the middle of the rain looking at me like rescuing him was a personal insult. The wolf huffed. Olivia laughed. See? That's exactly the sound he made. A warmth settled in her chest as she looked down at him. 3 days wasn't long. It shouldn't have been enough time to get attached. Yet somehow the cottage felt fuller when he was there. Less quiet. Less lonely. The wolf leaned very slightly into her hand. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for her. The stranger watched the small gesture carefully. And, you brought him home. Someone had to. Olivia shrugged. The poor thing was soaked. The wolf immediately looked insulted by the word poor. You had mud all over your face, Olivia informed him. You looked ridiculous. The wolf turned away. The stranger's smile deepened. Then something changed. The wolf suddenly stood and stepped directly in front of Olivia. Every muscle in his body tightened. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Protective. The men behind the stranger exchanged glances. The silver-eyed man simply stared at the wolf for several quiet seconds before speaking. Interesting. Olivia frowned. What is? His eyes lifted to hers. Only that he remembers you. A chill ran down her spine. What does that mean? But the stranger didn't answer. Instead, the scent of rain drifted stronger through the trees. The wind stirred the branches overhead. And suddenly memory pulled backward like a tide, carrying everything 72 hours into the past, to a flooded creek, a storm-dark forest, and a pair of amber eyes watching Olivia Carter through the rain as though they had been waiting for her all along. Rain hammered the mountains so hard that the world beyond Olivia Carter's windshield looked blurred and unreal. Her old pickup rattled along the narrow road beside Miller Creek while thunder rolled across the valley. Most people would have stayed home on a night like this. Olivia had tried. Then she discovered she was out of coffee. 20 minutes later, she was driving through a storm that seemed determined to wash half the county away. Living alone in a cottage deep in the mountains had its advantages. Peace, quiet, freedom. Unfortunately, it also meant that when you forgot something, there was nobody else to blame. The windshield wipers swept back and forth as rain pounded the glass. Olivia was halfway through reminding herself why midnight coffee runs were a terrible idea when a flash of lightning illuminated something near the flooded creek. She slowed immediately. A large gray shape stood near the rushing water. Motionless. Watching. Nope, she said. Absolutely not. She drove another 20 yards. Then sighed. I am going to stop, aren't I? 5 minutes later, she was standing in the rain with a flashlight. Water soaked through her jacket almost instantly. The creek roared beside her. The gray shape remained exactly where she had seen it. As she stepped closer, her breath caught. A wolf. A massive wolf. Larger than any she had ever seen. Rain streamed from silver-gray fur. Amber eyes watched her from the darkness. Intelligent eyes. Calm eyes. Eyes that looked entirely too aware. For a long moment, neither moved. Olivia could hear the rain. The creek. Her own heartbeat. The wolf simply watched her. Not frightened. Not aggressive. Just studying her. Well, she said carefully. You are definitely not a branch. The wolf blinked once. Thunder echoed overhead. Olivia took another step. You know, most wild animals usually run away from strangers. The wolf continued staring. Great conversation. Another flash of lightning revealed droplets trembling on his fur. He looked cold despite trying very hard not to show it. Something inside Olivia softened. The poor thing looked proud enough to argue with the weather itself. Oh, you stubborn giant. She crouched slowly. Listen, I know we just met, but you look miserable. The wolf looked deeply offended. Olivia laughed despite herself. The sound surprised her. Most nights the only voice she heard in the cottage was her own. The laughter seemed to surprise the wolf too. His ears twitched slightly. The storm carried the scent of wet pine and cold mountain air between them. For some reason, the smell felt oddly familiar. Comforting. Olivia reached into the truck and grabbed the emergency blanket she kept behind the seat. I am going to regret this. The wolf stiffened the moment she approached. Amber eyes locked onto hers. Rain fell between them. Seconds passed. Then, unexpectedly, the wolf lowered his head a fraction. Permission. Olivia carefully draped the blanket across his shoulders. Warm silver-gray fur brushed her fingers. For the briefest moment, the wolf leaned into the touch. Just a little. Then he immediately straightened and looked annoyed with himself. Olivia smiled. There you are. The wolf snorted. Secret softy. Another offended look. Definitely. Offended. Olivia laughed again. The wolf watched her closely this time. The sound seemed to hold his attention longer than it should have. Finally, Olivia stood and pointed toward the truck. Come on. You can stay out here pretending this weather is fun, or you can come home with me. The wolf looked toward the dark forest behind him, then toward the truck, then back to Olivia. His gaze lingered on her face, on her smile, on the rain dripping from her hair. For one strange second, it almost looked like he was making a decision. Then the giant wolf started walking toward the truck with all the enthusiasm of a king being sentenced to community service. Olivia grinned and followed. She did not notice the way his pace slowed whenever she fell behind. She did not notice how often those amber eyes checked to make sure she was still there. And she certainly did not notice that when he climbed into the truck, the first thing he did was inhale the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and Olivia lingering in the cab. For the first time in what felt like forever, The wolf closed his eyes briefly. Warm. Safe. Then he opened them again before anyone could notice. The storm followed them all the way home. Rain drummed against the roof of the pickup while Olivia guided the truck up the winding mountain road toward her cottage. The giant wolf occupied the passenger seat as though he had personally paid for the vehicle. Water dripped from his fur onto the floor mats. He stared straight ahead with the dignity of a king enduring an inconvenience. Olivia glanced at him and shook her head. You know, most strays at least pretend to be grateful. The wolf ignored her completely. Right? We are still doing the silent treatment. By the time they reached the cottage, darkness had settled over the mountains. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows, glowing against the storm like a beacon. The wolf paused beside the truck when he saw it. Rain continued falling around him, but for a brief second, he simply stared. Olivia noticed. Welcome home, she said before immediately laughing at herself. Okay, that sounded way too emotional for somebody I met 20 minutes ago. The wolf followed her. Inside, warmth wrapped around them instantly. The scent of cinnamon, vanilla, honey, and burning firewood filled the cottage. The wolf stopped again. His ears twitched. His amber eyes moved slowly across the room. The fireplace, the bookshelves, the old couch, the knitted blankets. Everything felt quiet. Safe. Olivia hung up her soaked jacket and turned around. You are not getting on the furniture. The wolf glanced at the couch, then at her, then back at the couch. Olivia narrowed her eyes. Do not even think about it. 10 minutes later, she returned from changing clothes and found the giant wolf asleep in the exact center of her favorite chair. Olivia stood silently. The wolf opened one eye. Neither moved. That is my chair. The eye closed again. Olivia laughed. Unbelievable. The next challenge arrived in the form of a towel. You are soaked, she informed him. We are fixing that. The wolf immediately backed away. Do not start. Another step backward. You literally climbed into my truck. Another step. You trusted me enough to come home. The wolf stared at the towel with deep suspicion. 5 minutes later, Olivia was chasing a giant wolf around her living room while he avoided the towel as though it had personally offended his ancestors. Eventually, she managed to dry enough of his fur to satisfy herself. The wolf looked exhausted by the experience. Olivia looked victorious. There. Much better. The wolf clearly disagreed. Later, while a pot of soup simmered on the stove, Olivia noticed he had settled near the fireplace. His eyes followed her every movement through the kitchen. Not obvious enough for most people to notice. Obvious enough for her. What? She asked. The wolf looked away. That is what I thought. The smell of chicken, herbs, and fresh bread filled the cottage. The wolf continued pretending he was not interested. Unfortunately, his ears turned toward the kitchen every time Olivia opened the oven. You are not fooling anybody. By the time dinner was ready, she was smiling more than she had in weeks. The cottage felt different. Less empty. Less quiet. Later that evening, Olivia stepped outside to bring in extra firewood before the weather worsened. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air cool and fragrant with pine. She gathered an armful of logs and started back toward the porch. Halfway there, her boot slipped slightly on the wet ground. Before she could react, a large gray shape appeared beside her. The wolf stood close enough that she could have reached out and touched him. Alert. Watching. Making sure she was steady. Olivia blinked. Were you worried about me? The wolf immediately looked away. Right? Of course not. Back inside, the fire crackled softly while Olivia curled up on the couch with a book. The wolf stretched out near the hearth. For the first time since meeting him, neither seemed in a hurry to move. The hours passed quietly, warmly, comfortably. Eventually, Olivia yawned and headed toward her bedroom. Good night, Grumpy. The wolf lifted his head but did not follow. Smiling, Olivia closed her door and climbed into bed. Sometime after midnight, she woke briefly and frowned. The cottage was silent. Curious, she opened her bedroom door. Moonlight spilled through the windows. And there, stretched across the hallway directly outside her room, lay the giant wolf. Like a guard standing watch. Like he had no intention of letting anything reach her while he was there. Olivia Carter realized the wolf had developed a habit. It took her 2 days to notice it, and another 5 minutes to realize just how ridiculous it was. Wherever she went, he appeared. If she worked in the garden, he stretched out beneath the apple tree where he could watch her. If she baked in the kitchen, He occupied the doorway like a furry security guard. If she carried laundry upstairs, she inevitably turned around and found a pair of amber eyes supervising the entire operation. "You know this is strange, right?" Olivia asked one morning while kneading bread dough. The wolf lifted his head from the kitchen floor. Normal wolves do not monitor cinnamon bread production. The wolf blinked once. Olivia pointed a flour-covered finger at him. Exactly. The truly alarming part was that she had started talking to him constantly. The even more alarming part was that sometimes she felt as though he was listening. Not hearing. Listening. Later that afternoon, Olivia drove into town for supplies. The wolf stayed behind. At least that had been the plan. 20 minutes later, she stepped out of the general store carrying 2 bags and nearly dropped both when she spotted a familiar gray shape lying beside her truck. The wolf looked up lazily. Olivia stared. "How?" The wolf yawned. "No. Seriously. How?" An elderly woman walking past smiled. "Beautiful dog." The wolf immediately looked offended. "He is not a dog." To Olivia's annoyance, the wolf looked extremely pleased with that answer. The drive home should have been peaceful. Instead, the wolf spent the entire trip occupying the passenger seat like he had personally financed the vehicle. Late that afternoon, Olivia was stacking firewood on the porch when the wolf suddenly lifted his head. His ears turned toward the distant road. A few seconds later, he stood, alert, focused, watching the trees. Olivia frowned. "What is it?" The wolf remained still. Almost a full minute passed before she finally heard it. The faint sound of an approaching engine. "You heard that before I did?" The wolf glanced at her. Not guilty, not proud, just aware. A pickup truck rolled into view moments later. Ben Turner stepped out carrying a small cardboard box. "Hey, Olivia." "Ben." He held up the box. "I brought back your pie dish." Olivia laughed. "You borrowed that 3 months ago. I like to think of myself as responsibly delayed." Ben smiled. The wolf did not. He calmly crossed the porch and sat directly between them. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present. A giant silver-gray wall with opinions. Ben blinked. "You know, I have lived around wolves my whole life." The wolf watched him carefully. "And?" Olivia asked. Ben shook his head. "I have never seen one act like that." The wolf's ears twitched. "Act like what?" "Like he understands every word we are saying." Olivia laughed. "Trust me, I have had the same thought." For one brief second, something almost human flashed through the wolf's amber eyes. Then it vanished. Ben wisely surrendered the pie dish and retreated before starting a debate he could not win. As his truck disappeared down the driveway, Olivia folded her arms and looked down at the wolf. "You scared him off again." The wolf looked entirely unapologetic. That evening, the mountains settled into peaceful silence. Crickets sang beyond the open windows. The scent of pine drifted through the cottage. Olivia curled up on the couch with a book and a mug of tea while the wolf stretched out near the fireplace. At least that was where he started. Half an hour later, he had somehow moved several feet closer. Another chapter passed. Closer again. By the time Olivia reached the final page, the giant wolf was resting beside the couch. "Comfortable?" she asked softly. The wolf kept his eyes closed. Smiling, Olivia reached down and scratched behind one ear. This time he did not pretend not to enjoy it. Instead, he leaned ever so slightly into her hand before catching himself. The tiny gesture lasted less than a second. It was enough. Olivia's smile softened. Outside, moonlight spilled across the mountains. Inside, warmth from the fireplace wrapped around the room. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt shared, comfortable, natural, almost as if the wolf had always belonged there. Then, just before midnight, the wolf's head lifted suddenly. His ears angled toward the window. His entire body went still. Olivia looked up from her book. "What is it?" The wolf stared into the darkness beyond the glass. Watching, listening, waiting. As though somewhere beyond the mountains, something was finally beginning to look for him. The next morning began with sunshine, birdsong, and complete betrayal. Olivia Carter walked into the kitchen expecting a peaceful start to her day. Instead, she found her favorite cinnamon muffins missing from the cooling rack. She stopped, blinked, counted twice. There had been 6. There were now 3. Slowly, she turned around. The giant gray wolf sat near the fireplace looking exceptionally innocent. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "You ate them." The wolf blinked. "Do not lie to me. There are crumbs on your nose." The wolf immediately lifted a paw and rubbed his muzzle. Olivia laughed so hard she nearly dropped her coffee mug. Unbelievable. The wolf looked offended by the accusation despite the overwhelming evidence. Later that morning, the mountain air felt crisp and fresh after days of rain. Olivia spent several hours working in her garden, while the wolf supervised from beneath the apple tree. At least that was what she called it. He seemed to believe his primary responsibility in life was making sure she remained visible at all times. Every time she moved to another section of the garden, she would glance up and discover he had somehow relocated without her noticing. "You know you are terrible at pretending not to follow me, right?" she asked while planting herbs. The wolf yawned. Olivia smiled. The answer was obvious. He was not staying because he had nowhere else to go. He was staying because he wanted to. For reasons she could not understand, the realization made her strangely happy. By afternoon, clouds had begun gathering over the mountains once again. Not a storm, just drifting gray clouds that softened the sunlight. Olivia carried a basket of laundry onto the porch and nearly tripped over the wolf stretched across the doorway. "You are becoming a hazard." The wolf opened one eye. "One day I am going to put a bell around your neck." The eye closed again. Olivia stepped over him carefully. The wolf immediately stood and followed. "There it is," she said. "You lasted 8 seconds." The wolf looked deeply insulted by her math. That evening she baked fresh bread while soft music played from an old radio near the kitchen window. The cottage smelled of cinnamon, honey, warm yeast, and rosemary. The wolf remained in the doorway as usual. Yet something felt different tonight. His attention seemed divided. Every so often his ears twitched toward the windows, toward the forest, toward something only he could hear. Olivia noticed immediately. "What is it?" The wolf looked at her, then toward the darkening mountains, then back again. A strange unease settled inside her chest. The feeling vanished as quickly as it arrived. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a low whisper. The wolf listened carefully, waiting, watching, as though expecting something. Olivia set the bread aside and walked over to him. "Hey." The wolf looked up. "Whatever it is, stop worrying." The words were meant as a joke. Yet when she reached down and rested her hand against the side of his neck, the tension seemed to leave him. His eyes softened slightly. For a brief moment, he leaned into the touch before catching himself. Olivia smiled. "There you are." The wolf huffed quietly, not annoyed, almost embarrassed. Later that night, a fire crackled softly inside the stone fireplace while rain tapped against the windows. Olivia sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket with a book resting in her lap. The wolf lay beside the hearth, at least until another roll of distant thunder echoed through the mountains. Then, without warning, he stood and crossed the room. Olivia barely looked up from her book before realizing he had settled directly beside the couch, close enough that his shoulder touched the edge of the blanket. "Oh." The wolf pretended not to notice. Olivia hid a smile and returned to reading. Minutes passed. The rain grew heavier. The fire crackled warmly. Somewhere along the way, her hand drifted down until her fingers rested lightly against the thick fur along his shoulder. Neither moved away. Outside, the storm rolled across the mountains. Inside, the cottage felt impossibly warm. Safe. Quiet. Then, somewhere beyond the forest, a long distant howl carried through the night. The wolf's head lifted instantly. Every muscle in his body went still. And for the first time since arriving at the cottage, genuine conflict flashed through his amber eyes. The howl lingered in the mountains long after the sound itself had faded. Olivia Carter lowered her book and glanced toward the wolf. He remained perfectly still beside the couch. The fire crackled softly. Rain tapped against the windows. Yet something had changed. The comfortable warmth that usually surrounded him seemed distant now. Thoughtful. Distracted. "Friend of yours?" Olivia asked lightly. One amber eye shifted toward her. "That bad, huh?" The wolf huffed quietly and rested his head on his paws. Olivia smiled and returned to her book, but she noticed he did not relax for the rest of the evening. Several times his ears twitched toward the forest. Several times. He lifted his head as though listening for something only he could hear. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunshine spilled across the mountains, turning raindrops into scattered diamonds among the pine trees. Olivia stepped onto the porch carrying a mug of coffee and immediately stopped. The wolf was gone. Her stomach dropped before she could stop it. The yard stood empty. No giant gray shape beneath the apple tree. No amber eyes watching from the garden. Nothing. Oh, the single word escaped before she could hide her disappointment. She stared at the forest. For some reason, the mountains suddenly felt larger than usual. Quieter. Then a movement caught her eye. The wolf emerged from the trees carrying a small branch covered in bright mountain berries. Olivia blinked. Were you foraging? The wolf walked past her and dropped the branch on the porch. Then he sat down and looked entirely pleased with himself. Olivia laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. You disappeared at sunrise and came back with groceries. The wolf lifted his head proudly. You are the strangest animal I have ever met. The rest of the morning passed peacefully. Olivia worked in the garden while the wolf maintained his usual patrol route between the apple tree, the porch, and wherever she happened to be standing. By afternoon, however, strange things began happening. Twice, the wolf stopped whatever he was doing and stared toward the distant mountains. Once, he abandoned an entire piece of bacon to investigate a sound only he could hear. Olivia immediately became suspicious. You left bacon. The wolf ignored her. That is serious. His attention remained fixed on the horizon. The unease returned. Later, while Olivia was organizing supplies in the pantry, a loud knock echoed through the cottage. She opened the door expecting Ben. Instead, two unfamiliar men stood on the porch. Both wore dark jackets. Both looked exhausted. More importantly, both looked shocked when they saw the giant wolf inside the cottage. The wolf rose immediately. Every muscle in his body tightened. The taller man recovered first. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. His eyes flickered toward the wolf again. We are looking for someone. Olivia frowned. Someone. A man. The second visitor glanced at the wolf. Have you noticed anything unusual around here recently? Olivia looked over her shoulder. The wolf stared back. Besides him, the visitors exchanged a look. A very strange look. Actually, the taller man said carefully, something exactly like that. The wolf stepped forward. Not threatening. Just unmistakably warning them that the conversation was over. Olivia folded her arms. Well, unless you lost a giant wolf with terrible manners, I do not think I can help. The men looked as though they wanted to say more. Instead, they thanked her and returned to their vehicle. The moment the truck disappeared down the road, silence settled across the mountains once again. Olivia slowly turned toward the wolf. Okay. The wolf sat down. I think we need to discuss why random strangers keep looking at you like you owe them money. The wolf blinked. Do not give me that face. He blinked again. Olivia sighed. The conversation was clearly going nowhere. That night, after the dishes were done and the lights were low, she found him sitting beside the window. Moonlight silvered his fur. Beyond the glass stretched endless dark mountains. The wolf watched them in silence. Waiting. Listening. Torn between two worlds. Olivia walked over and sat beside him on the floor. Neither spoke. Neither moved. After a while, she rested her shoulder lightly against his side. Whatever is out there, she whispered softly, you do not have to face it alone. For the first time that day, the tension left his body. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, unseen riders continued searching. And for the first time, they were getting close. Olivia Carter knew something was wrong the moment she woke up. At first, she could not explain why. The morning sunlight looked the same as always, spilling through the bedroom window in soft golden bands. The mountains beyond the glass remained peaceful. The cottage remained warm. Quiet. Too quiet. Then she realized what was missing. No heavy footsteps outside her door. No giant gray shapes stretched across the hallway. No familiar presence waiting for breakfast before she had even poured her coffee. Olivia sat up slowly. No, she opened her bedroom door. The hallway stood empty. The living room was empty. The space beside the fireplace was empty. Her heart sank. Grumpy. Silence answered. She checked the kitchen. Nothing. The porch. Nothing. The apple tree. Nothing. The garden. Nothing. Only the morning breeze moving gently through the grass. Olivia folded her arms and stared toward the forest. You could have at least said goodbye. The words came out lighter than she felt. Back inside, she poured herself coffee and tried to continue her normal routine. It lasted approximately 7 minutes. She reached for a second mug before remembering she lived alone. Her hand stopped halfway across the counter. The extra mug remained where it was, waiting for someone who was not there. Olivia looked away. This is ridiculous, she muttered. He is a wolf. Yet somehow the cottage felt larger without him. Emptier. The silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt wrong. By midday, she had baked cinnamon muffins, watered the garden, reorganized an entire kitchen cabinet, and checked the front porch at least 12 times. Not that she was counting. Around lunchtime, she discovered one of her missing socks beneath the couch. Beside it sat half of a cinnamon muffin that had clearly been hidden for later. Olivia stared at the evidence, then laughed despite herself. You absolute menace. The laughter faded quickly. The hidden muffin remained. The wolf did not. Later that afternoon, Ben Turner stopped by with a bag of apples from his family's orchard. You look tired, he observed. I am fine. Ben glanced around. Where is your bodyguard? Olivia forced a smile. Apparently, he had somewhere to be. Ben's expression softened slightly. He will probably come back. Probably. The answer sounded far less confident than she intended. After Ben left, Olivia carried the apples inside and placed them on the counter. The cottage smelled of cinnamon, honey, and fresh bread. Normally the wolf would have appeared the second food entered the room. Today there was nothing. The absence followed her everywhere. Every room held reminders. The chair he had stolen. The blanket he had claimed. The porch steps where he sat every evening. The spot beside the couch where he pretended not to enjoy ear scratches. By sunset, Olivia found herself sitting on the porch staring toward the mountains. The sky glowed orange and pink beyond the endless line of pine trees. Somewhere out there, he was making his own choices, living his own life. She should have been happy about that. Instead, her chest hurt in a way she did not entirely understand. You are ridiculous, she informed herself. You knew he would leave eventually. The words sounded reasonable. Her heart ignored them completely. As darkness settled over the valley, another vehicle climbed the road toward the cottage. Olivia immediately recognized neither the truck nor the man driving it. He stopped at the edge of the property and stepped out. Well-dressed, serious, alert. His eyes moved across the cottage, the yard, the surrounding forest. Searching. Olivia remained on the porch. Can I help you? The stranger hesitated. Possibly. His gaze lingered on the empty yard. Have you seen a large gray wolf recently? Olivia's pulse quickened. Why? The man studied her carefully. Because a great many people have been looking for him. Before Olivia could respond, a distant howl echoed through the mountains. Both of them turned toward the forest. The stranger's expression changed immediately. Relief. Hope. Recognition. Then he offered Olivia a small smile. Good, he said quietly. He is closer than we thought. The man returned to his truck moments later, leaving Olivia alone with 1,000 unanswered questions. Night settled fully over the mountains. One by one, stars appeared above the dark pine trees. Eventually Olivia went inside, though sleep refused to come easily. Hours passed. The cottage remained silent. Then, sometime after midnight, a soft sound echoed from the porch. Not a knock. Not quite. More like the gentle scrape of something settling against the front door. Olivia froze. Her heart immediately began racing. For several seconds, she simply listened. Another faint sound followed. Then silence. Slowly, she slipped from bed and crossed the dark cottage. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards. Her hand touched the doorknob. She held her breath. And on the other side of the door, something waited. Olivia Carter stood frozen in the dark hallway with her hand wrapped around the doorknob. Her heartbeat thundered inside her chest. Another soft sound came from the porch. Not a knock. Not a scratch. A familiar sound. The kind she had heard dozens of times outside her bedroom door during the past week. Grumpy, she whispered. A low huff answered from the other side. Relief hit, so suddenly her knees nearly gave out. She pulled the door open. Cold mountain air rushed into the cottage carrying the scent of pine, rain, and wild earth. The porch stood empty beneath the moonlight. Olivia blinked. You have got to be kidding me. Then she noticed something resting beside the door. Her missing gardening glove. The one she had lost near the creek days ago. Olivia stared at it before laughing helplessly. You disappeared for a day and returned my glove? The forest offered no explanation. Yet somehow she could almost feel Amber eyes watching from somewhere beyond the trees. She carried the glove inside and slept very little. By morning she found herself looking toward the forest every few minutes. Hope had returned. So had frustration. By late afternoon, both emotions were battling for first place when a dark vehicle rolled up the driveway. Olivia looked up from the porch swing. The silver-eyed stranger stepped out. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, calm, broad-shouldered, and carrying the same scent of rain-soaked pine that instantly made her chest tighten. For a second, neither moved. You, Olivia said. His mouth curved slightly. Me? You have excellent timing. I have been told that before. Olivia stood. Please tell me you are finally going to explain what is happening. I am going to try. Something in his voice felt different. Softer. More personal. As though the distance between stranger and acquaintance had somehow disappeared. He climbed the porch steps. The closer he came, the stronger that familiar scent became. Rain. Pine. Cold mountain air. Olivia's pulse quickened for reasons she could not explain. The stranger noticed. His silver eyes softened. May I come in? Olivia stepped aside. Only because I have questions. I expected as much. The moment he entered the cottage, his attention drifted instinctively toward the oversized chair beside the fireplace. Olivia immediately pointed at him. No, one dark eyebrow lifted. No, that chair is occupied. Amusement flickered across his face. By whom? You know exactly by whom. To her surprise, he smiled. Not politely. Not vaguely. Genuinely. The expression transformed him. Olivia's breath caught. Somehow that smile felt familiar too. The stranger glanced toward the chair again. For the record, it is still the best chair in the house. Olivia froze. What? Comfortable. Excellent view of the kitchen. He looked toward her. Close enough to smell cinnamon bread before it comes out of the oven. Silence filled the room. Olivia stared. Her heartbeat stumbled. The stranger slowly walked farther inside. His gaze moved around the cottage with unmistakable recognition. The bookshelf. The fireplace. The kitchen doorway. The blanket basket. Places he should not know. Places he somehow did. You keep the honey on the second shelf, he said quietly. And you hide the good cinnamon in the top cabinet because you think it lasts longer. Olivia's breath caught. How do you know that? He smiled faintly. You talk while you bake. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Warmer. More intimate. Olivia folded her arms. Who are you? For a moment the stranger simply looked at her. The fire crackled softly behind them. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees. My name is Alexander. The name settled between them. Familiar somehow, despite being new. Alexander. Olivia repeated. Okay, Alexander. Explain. His gaze lingered on her face. Do you remember the storm? The one where I found a giant wolf standing in a flooded creek. Yes. Olivia narrowed her eyes. You are not about to tell me that wolf belonged to you, are you? Alexander's expression shifted. Something warm. Something almost nervous. Not exactly. The silence stretched. Olivia waited. Alexander took a slow breath. You talked to him every day. Obviously. You argued with him about muffins. He stole them. Several times. I am aware. A smile touched Alexander's lips. You chased him around the living room with a towel. Olivia stared. How do you know about that? You threatened to put a bell around his neck. Her pulse jumped. How do you know that? You complained that he followed you everywhere. Another step closer. You never noticed that he slowed down whenever you walked behind him. Olivia could barely breathe. Alexander. You never noticed that he waited outside your door every night. His voice softened. Or that he always knew when you were sad before you said a word. The room seemed to tilt. Every memory rushed back at once. The apple tree. The porch. The fireplace. The chair. The muffins. The hidden sock. The way the wolf always appeared whenever she needed him. Olivia looked into Alexander's eyes. Silver now. Yet somehow she could still see it. The same patience. The same stubbornness. The same warmth. No, she whispered. Alexander reached into his coat pocket. He placed something carefully onto the coffee table between them. Half of a cinnamon muffin. Slightly crushed. Perfectly preserved. Olivia stared at it. Her heart stopped. No, she repeated, weaker this time. Alexander's smile was impossibly gentle. You call me grumpy. Olivia felt tears sting unexpectedly. That is not possible. Probably not. His voice lowered. But I still know where you lost your gardening glove. Her breath caught. And I still think your favorite chair is more comfortable than the couch. A helpless laugh escaped her despite everything. Alexander smiled. Relief flooded his features at the sound. For one long moment, neither moved. The fire crackled softly. The scent of cinnamon lingered in the air. Rain clouds gathered beyond the windows. Olivia suddenly realized something. Since the moment he entered the cottage, The emptiness she had been carrying was gone. The house felt right again. Whole again. Alexander saw the realization in her eyes. His own gaze softened. "I came back," he said quietly. Olivia looked up at him. Close enough now to see every silver fleck in his eyes. Close enough to hear the steady rhythm of his breathing. Close enough to recognize the familiar comfort she had missed all day. "Why?" she asked softly. Alexander held her gaze. The answer came without hesitation. "Because my wolf never wanted to leave you." Olivia Carter stood in the center of her cottage and looked at Alexander as though she still expected him to disappear. The fire crackled softly behind them. Rain whispered against the windows. Everything felt familiar and completely impossible at the same time. Alexander leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her with the same patient focus she had seen countless times beside the apple tree, near the fireplace, and from the passenger seat of her truck. Only now there was no fur, no pause, no amber eyes. Yet somehow she recognized him more clearly than ever. "You are staring again," he said. Olivia folded her arms. "I am processing." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. I spent a week talking to a wolf." "You talked enough for both of us." Olivia pointed at him. "That is not helping." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. The sight made her heart do something embarrassing. The worst part was that he noticed. Of course he noticed. He had the senses of a wolf and the confidence of a king. "You can hear that, can you not?" she asked. "Hear what?" "My heartbeat." "Yes." Olivia groaned and covered her face. Alexander laughed softly. The sound wrapped around the room like warmth from the fire. "That seems unfair." "It is occasionally useful." For example, I know you are happy I came back." Olivia lowered her hands. "Do not get smug about it." "I would never." "That was smug." "A little." She shook her head, laughing despite herself. For a few moments neither spoke. The comfortable silence settled between them naturally. Strange as everything was, the cottage no longer felt wrong. The emptiness that had haunted every room since he disappeared was gone. The chair beside the fireplace no longer looked abandoned. The porch no longer felt lonely. Even the kitchen somehow felt complete again. Alexander glanced toward the mountains beyond the window. "The search is over." Olivia looked up. "Because they found you?" "Because I told them where I am staying." She blinked. "You told them?" "Yes." "And they were fine with that." A faint smile appeared. "They had opinions." "I imagine they did." Alexander stepped closer. "Their opinions mattered less than mine." Something about the quiet certainty in his voice stole her breath. "And what was your opinion?" she asked softly. His silver eyes held hers. "That I was tired of leaving." The answer settled deep inside her chest. For the first time she understood. It was not simply that Alexander had returned. He had chosen to return. Chosen her. Chosen this cottage. Chosen the life he found here. The realization felt bigger than any title he could possibly carry. "You are really important, are you not?" she asked. Alexander sighed. "Apparently." "That is still not an answer." "Olivia." His expression softened. "The title matters less than the choice." "What choice?" "This one." His gaze drifted around the cottage. The bookshelves. The kitchen. The fireplace. The chair he had illegally occupied for days. Then his eyes returned to her. "I spent years surrounded by responsibility. Expectations. Endless obligations. Then one storm changed everything." Olivia smiled faintly. "A storm?" "A stubborn woman dragged me home and fed me muffins." "You stole those muffins." "Details. Important details." Alexander laughed again. "Perhaps." He took another step closer. The scent of pine and rain surrounded him. Familiar. Comforting. Home. Olivia realized she had stopped associating that scent with the forest. Now she associated it with him. Her pulse quickened. Alexander's eyes softened immediately. "There it is again. Stop listening to my heartbeat." "That would be difficult." "Why?" "Because it is my favorite sound." Olivia forgot how to breathe for a second. Alexander seemed equally surprised by his own honesty. For once, neither of them had a joke ready. The silence stretched between them. Gentle, meaningful, real. Then Olivia closed the distance. Her hands found his. Warm fingers intertwined naturally. Neither of them rushed. Neither wanted to. They had already spent days finding their way toward each other without realizing it. This was simply the moment they finally stopped pretending. "The cottage was awful without you," Olivia admitted quietly. Alexander smiled. "I know. You are not supposed to say that. I am when it is true." I checked the porch 12 times. Only 12. Do not make fun of me. I would never. Liar. Probably. The laughter faded as quickly as it came. Alexander lifted one hand and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was impossibly gentle. Olivia looked up at him. The same steady attention she had known from the wolf stared back at her. The same loyalty. The same warmth. The same stubborn devotion. The kiss that followed felt less like a beginning and more like an answer. Soft. Unhurried. Familiar. As though some part of both of them had been moving toward this moment since the day she found a grumpy wolf standing in a mountain creek. When they finally pulled apart, neither moved very far. Olivia rested her forehead lightly against his. Alexander smiled. My wolf was right. About what? You are worth coming back for. Her eyes immediately filled with tears she refused to let fall. That was unfairly romantic. I have been saving material. For a week. For much longer than that. Olivia laughed and wrapped her arms around him. Alexander held her just a little tighter. Outside, the storm clouds finally drifted away. Stars appeared above the mountains one by one. Inside, the cottage glowed with warmth and firelight. Hours later, Olivia stood in the kitchen baking fresh cinnamon bread while Alexander occupied the doorway exactly as he had done every day before the reveal. You are supervising again. Observing. You are in the way. A frequent accusation. A correct accusation. The smell of cinnamon filled the room. Alexander's attention immediately shifted toward the oven. Olivia narrowed her eyes. Do not even think about it. Think about what? The bread. I am offended by the implication. You stole muffins. Allegedly. I literally caught you. The evidence was circumstantial. Olivia laughed so hard she nearly dropped the mixing spoon. Some things, thankfully, never changed. Later that evening, she carried 2 mugs of coffee into the living room and immediately stopped. Alexander. He looked up innocently from the oversized chair beside the fireplace. Yes. Move. No, that is my chair. Interesting theory. Alexander. He settled deeper into the cushions. I occupied it first. You absolutely did not. History disagrees. Olivia grabbed a pillow and tossed it at him. Alexander caught it effortlessly. Such aggression. You are impossible. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Alexander smiled. The same infuriating smile. The same stubborn confidence. The same grumpy wolf she had brought home from a storm. Olivia shook her head and sat beside him anyway. Outside, the mountain stood quiet beneath the stars. Inside, the cottage was filled with laughter, cinnamon, firelight, and the kind of peace neither of them had expected to find. She had thought she rescued a stray wolf on a rainy afternoon. Instead, she gave a king a reason to come home. And when Alexander casually reached for the last cinnamon muffin on the table, Olivia finally understood one important truth. Some habits never changed, especially the ones worth keeping.